Egocentric bias. Imagine Sarah, a dedicated environmental activist, firmly believing that her friends also prioritize sustainability as much as she does. Or Jacob going to his group of friends, who are voting Republican right, just to get confused stares. This tendency to overestimate the alignment of others' beliefs, values, and behaviors with one's own is known as the egocentric bias. Under the umbrella of social biases, this cognitive bias can lead to miscommunications and misunderstandings. It's also referred to as the false consensus effect. The bias was identified by Lee Ross and his colleagues in 1977. To overcome this bias, remind yourself that individuals have diverse perspectives and experiences, and taking the time to actively listen and engage in open conversations can help you gain a more accurate understanding of others' viewpoints. Choice supportive bias. Consider John, who recently chose a particular smartphone model from an array of options. As he discusses his choice with friends, he starts highlighting features that were not initially his primary reasons for choosing that model. He claims that 5G is the most important part of his phone, even though he didn't really mind or know the difference between 4G and 5G at the time of purchasing. He retroactively attributes positive attributes to his decision. This phenomenon is the choice supportive bias, falling under the category of memory biases. It leads us to remember our choices more favorably. This bias, also known as post-purchase rationalization or post-decisional dissonance, was first most prominently explored by Jack Brem in 1956. In our example, John was doing extra rationalizing after buying his phone. To counter this bias, it's essential to critically assess your decisions, acknowledging that the choices you've made might not always have been as well reasoned as they appear in hindsight. Semmelweis Reflex. Meet Alex, a seasoned physician who staunchly defends traditional medical practices, refusing to consider emerging research that challenges established norms. New data about the side effects of antidepressants challenges the way he has been treating patients for the past 15 years. This reluctance to accept new evidence due to its contradiction with existing beliefs is the Semmelweis reflex. This bias falls under the category of decision-making biases and is closely related to confirmation bias. Named after Ignaz Semmelweis, a Hungarian physician who championed hand-washing in the mid-1800s, this bias is a reminder of the dangers of rejecting new information without thoughtful consideration. To combat this bias, cultivate an open-minded attitude toward new ideas and evidence, even if they challenge your existing beliefs. Actor-observer bias. Imagine Emily observing her friend Mark arriving late to a meeting. She attributes his tardiness to his lack of punctuality and assumes he's irresponsible. However, when Emily herself is late to another meeting, she attributes her lateness to unexpected traffic and external circumstances. This disparity in attributing actions is the actor-observer bias, falling under the umbrella of attribution biases. This cognitive bias can strain relationships and hinder empathy. It's also known as the fundamental attribution error. The bias has been studied since the 1960s by social psychologists. To overcome this bias, try to see situations from both perspectives and consider external factors when judging others' actions. Illusion of transparency. Picture Daniel, a nervous job applicant, believing that his interviewers can easily discern his anxiety during the interview, further exacerbating his exhibition of nervous mannerisms and dialogue. This belief that our internal thoughts and emotions are more apparent to others than they actually are is the illusion of transparency. Classified as a social bias, it can lead to undue self-consciousness and misunderstanding, most prominently discovered by Elizabeth Newton in a Stanford test, where a set of subjects tapped, with their fingers, the rhythm to a well-known song, like Happy Birthday or the national anthem. They predicted the other set of test subjects would guess the right song 50% of the time, but it turns out, only 3% picked the right song. The tappers had the illusion that their thoughts of the melody were more transparent to the guessers than they actually were. This bias highlights our tendency to overestimate the visibility of our emotions. To counter this bias, remind yourself that others might not perceive your inner emotions as clearly as you think, and practice self-compassion when dealing with self-consciousness. Planning fallacy. Meet Maria, a project manager who consistently underestimates the time needed for her team to complete a project, leading to missed deadlines. This tendency to underestimate time, costs, and risks while overestimating benefits is the planning fallacy. This bias, part of the category of cognitive biases, can lead to poor decision-making and project management. First identified by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky in 1979, this bias underscores the human inclination to be overly optimistic about future outcomes. To mitigate this bias, gather historical data and external input to make more realistic projections, and add buffer time to your plans. Self-serving bias in attribution. Imagine Chris, a basketball player, attributing his game-winning shot to his skill and practice, while attributing his missed shots to the uneven court surface. This tendency to credit positive events to internal factors and negative events to external factors is the self-serving bias in attribution. This bias is categorized as a social bias and can impact our self-esteem and interpersonal relationships. Discovered in the 1960s, this bias highlights our desire to maintain a positive self-image. To counter this bias, practice self-awareness and acknowledge both internal and external factors that contribute to outcomes. Functional fixedness. Picture Josh doing an engineering project in his garage, and he can't find his hammer. He spends hours looking for his hammer when he could have used the end of an electric screwdriver as a hammer, or the back of a book. This inability to see alternative uses for objects beyond their traditional functions is known as functional fixedness, part of the category of cognitive biases. It can impede problem solving and creativity. This bias was introduced by Carl Dunker in the 1940s. Functional fixedness prevents people from thinking laterally. People are fixated on the formal functions of objects and miss other ways they can be used. The opposite of functional fixedness is cognitive flexibility, which refers to the ability to use things in unusual or innovative ways. Cognitive flexibility is one of the most valuable skills that businesses are looking for in potential employees. To counter this bias, practice looking at objects from different perspectives and consider unconventional uses, fostering creative thinking and problem-solving skills. Incorporating these insights into your everyday life can enhance your decision-making, improve communication, and promote a more open-minded approach to new ideas and information. Remember that understanding and acknowledging these lesser-known cognitive biases can lead to more thoughtful interactions with both yourself and others. I have a part 2 cooking up where we look at another 8 cognitive biases that nobody really talks about, so subscribe if you don't want to miss it. Also, check out my other videos where I have AI-powered thought experiments. I recommend this one, where I made ChatGPT the US president, or this one, where we simulated to the year 2050. Subscribe if you've gotten smarter today.